Hey everyone, welcome back to CryptoCache. Thank you so much again for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. I'm not feeling super well, so we're going to make this kind of a shorter video, just kind of touching on the descending trend line, more specifically this potential double bottom pattern and how these altcoins are performing versus Bitcoin. And as per usual, just touch on CME futures and some liquidation data. So be sure to stick around. We got a good one today. Let's take a look. All right, folks, before we jump into the back end juicy liquidation data, I just want to ask you to quickly hit the like button, comment below if you get a chance. Thank you again so much for always doing that. Those of you who do that consistently are great. I'm super grateful for it, and you are awesome. So thanks again for being just a phenomenal part of my life, and welcome on board to the new community members who have joined from over the weekend. Now, when we look at the last 30 days here, this is kind of the biggest outlier I want to kind of point or bring to your attention as per usual. In most cases, when you see this much liquidation below the price and very little above, that does incentivize the price to continue lower. Okay, so it just implies a lot of people are buying these dips. They feel comfortable doing so, which makes sense. It's a heavily guarded area, this 107 108K range. But just got news for you folks. With this much, this chunk of liquidation immediately below the price, it leads me to believe we're going to pull back or continue a little bit lower to this 106, maybe 105K range. Okay, so majority of the liquidation is between 105 and 106K, and we'll look at some different timeframes too to give us some better perspectives on what's going on there. But as we can see, tons of longs getting liquidated. It's just no surprise, of course, that the price action pulling back the way it is. Because I did urge caution trading over the weekend, even though we took kind of a high risk long position with Ethereum. It invalidated quickly. We got out of that trade. So it's just one of those things where you got to kind of respect the market, and you're not always going to be right all the time. But for the most part, the macro trend is still down, and we got to kind of understand that that is a big deal right now, okay? That kind of incentivizes the price to continue lower until we establish higher highs and higher lows, or we break this descending trend line. So let's take a look at that here and kind of see what's going on. Before we do that though, just CryptoNet ETF outflows are still quite high, but once more, as we left off yesterday, or the day before rather, there's more outflows leading into the weekend than the opposite. So in most cases, you typically see quiet price action on weekends, which we did see, and then Asian markets open and they totally sold, okay? So you could argue that CME futures opened as well and the price action pulled back, which does lead me to this here. There are no CME gaps, so just keep that in mind. All the potential gaps that were starting over the weekend, they've all since been filled in both the upwards and downward direction for all three of these coins, okay? Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. So take a look at the back end data. Let's quickly recognize this here and just kind of understand that the macro point of control is 111,000. And that's just kind of that consistent area in for Bitcoin. That's that local resistance we saw, and a good chance we're going to retest that in the relative near future, because open interest does work as a magnet. That's where a lot of open orders are at. There's a lot of liquidity left, if you will. Okay, so I don't think we're just going to be going straight to the ground floor here, but generally speaking, when you see that amount of open interest, that does work like a magnet, and it's likely for the price action to want to come towards that at some point. My guess though is that market makers see that juicy liquidation just below the price action right now, and they're going to want to continue to push it lower. Those are my thoughts for the moment. Most things are going to look bearish here. If the price does recover, it's pretty easy to blame it on manipulation. I hate to even be that guy, but the truth is, the price should continue lower based on how everything's looking so far. If it were to recover, it's just that normal like rinse and repeat of how market makers drive the price to a desired area, and then they instantly buy or sell depending on the direction it's heading. Now at this point, 10 billion in liquidation short delta, this implies you shouldn't be taking a long position. That's kind of the concept there. And it was funny because somebody was mentioning in my last video, I think with just one troll, I was like a comment about the price action, how they didn't like that I said that this is good for the title, but it's actually, if you watch the entire video, the joke's on you, because the truth is we've been talking about this descending trend line, how you got to respect it for quite some time. Until we break that, we need to presume it's going to continue, okay? So make sure that you're in a position right now where you're not like just getting super crazy with longs. Even though it seems like an attractive idea right now, it may not actually be the greatest call, but let's just double check. See, when we look at liquidation, 106,000, there's a super heavy concentration of liquidation there at 106. So that's kind of that big chunk of liquidation to the downside. That leads me to believe that we're going to probably see that level first, just based on the simple fact in the last 7 days, yes, we got a ton of liquidation between 112 and 114, but we're super, super close. There's blood in the water, and a lot of market makers are like, we want that price, okay? So ideally, what they do is they sell until we hit that level, and then they instantly buy once that liquidation has been swept. It's not always an exact science like that. Granted, we're pretty overextended on lower timeframes, which we'll look at that. But the simple understanding here is that we're not in a great situation now that we rejected off that local point of control at 111. Okay. Now, overall, when we look at the 4-hour time frame, everything's super bearish. There's nothing here telling us we got a shift in momentum. You could argue that stochastic's starting to swing higher, which is true, but we haven't even bottomed out at 30 on the RSI yet. And money flow index is still above the price, which is actually generally a good sign. That shows that we have a lot more money flowing in and there's people are willing to buy. But once more, it's a Monday, folks. MFI on Mondays is it's hard to gauge, at least on lower timeframes. So if we look at the MFI on the daily time frame, we can see it's tapering off, pulling back. That's a little bit more accurate because it's looking at the last 14 days, not the last 14 candles. So in that case here, with us being under 50 on the RSI, generally speaking, the narrative is the same here. We're still in a bearish type of descending trend until we continue to progress with higher highs and higher lows or break above 111,000 at the very least. We're not going to be in a position where taking a long position with confidence is a good idea. All right, that's exactly why I held off on taking along with Bitcoin. Now, of course, obviously, hindsight's 2020, taken along with what seemed like a pretty strong altcoin, which we're going to look at Ethereum here next, was ideally just not the best call, right? But those things do happen sometimes. Weekend trades are high risk. That's why they are 10 out of 10 on the risk factor there. So make sure you pay attention to that and maybe just don't trade on the weekends. That's my general rule of thumb there. Take a look at the daily time frame though, just to clarify. We were looking pretty solid with 110K as a potential support range for us with the 20 and the 50-day, sorry, that's the 200 and the 20-day SMA right there at 110. So there is some confluence there, but right now with the price action being below that, we can presume that's going to be the resistance for us, okay? The last thing I want to just touch on is the hourly here and just kind of show you that this is kind of what a natural overextension looks like in trading. The price action pulls all the way back to a 9 on TD sequential here. Granted, it probably hit like a 12 for the continuation, but on average, you're going to see 9s to 12s for overextensions, at least X amount of movements in the same direction, because that is how long typical trading sessions last. Okay, it's that in combination with just the fact that what goes up must come down in the inverse as well. So we're starting to see bottoming here between 106 and 107.5. That was kind of the local bottom, but I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to progress lower if we can't continue to establish higher highs and higher lows. So we're going to pay close attention to this here and kind of see if there's any indication that the price is going to turn around. But for this, for the moment right now, not looking fantastic for Bitcoin. I would just hesitate and wait on the sidelines. It's best to just wait for a better opportunity here instead of forcing a trade. If you do force a trade, shorts make a lot more sense, but watch them close because they could turn around soon here because we are once again in a potential double bottom type of situation here. And I don't want you to read into this and walk away from this saying, oh, Cash said we should take a long at the double bottom. Not exactly. It's never an exact science. You never trade on patterns alone, but this does indicate that we're in a position where the price action could and potentially should continue higher now that we're overextended to the downside. Once more, there's a lot that goes into it, but that is that's a consolation for you there, folks. So there you go. All right, let's take a look at some altcoins. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, folks, take a quick look here at Ethereum and double check a few important factors. Now, when we drew out our descending trend line previously, consistent with a 20-day SMA, you can tell that we broke above the descending trend line, and it did look like Ethereum was ready to rock and roll. That obviously changed a lot based on the fact that Bitcoin kind of dumped when Asian markets opened late last night, but that's just kind of par for the course. It's how it goes. Generally speaking, that's why I always provide invalidation levels on my trades to ensure that you can always make sure to close those out early in case that doesn't work out. So we did have to close out our Ethereum trade a little bit early before it got out of hand. So good job on that. Now, when we take a look here in the backend data, just kind of touching on the comparison first before we jump in to the liquidation, we can see Ethereum's pretty consistent with Bitcoin now. While it was looking like a pretty strong coin versus Bitcoin prior to that, it's kind of aligned itself and or inversely paired itself with Bitcoin. So not a good look here. Does that mean we're going to go lower? Well, let's find out. I do recommend being cautious, shorting what feels like the tentative bottom for now, because we are at a double bottom on a lot of different coins, and those double bottoms can effectively play out to pump and hit those late shorts pretty hard. So as we see here, we can see once more 3850 to 3900 is that local point of control that was supposed to work as a support over the weekend, but of course low volume will breed pretty terrible results in most cases. So that's exactly why I like to emphasize not trading on the weekends. But when you look here at 3850 to 3900, you can see that there's a lot of resistance above us. So the price were to rally back to that level, we may want to presume that's going to be a resistance. Now moving forward here, we got 12 billion in short liquidation delta. That tells us we got a lot more people shorting this coin, and we look at liquidation here as well. The last 7 days, there's not a whole heck of a lot of it. So that's another reason why I'm a little concerned with trying to short what feels like the bottom here, because the likelihood of it bouncing from here is higher. But of course, obviously, if we zoom in a little bit further, we can see 3,500 is that local area of liquidation. So worst case scenario, 3,500, but I really don't think we're going to see that unless Bitcoin hits 100 to 105K, somewhere in that range. So between now and then, I would presume that the fact that we're assuming Bitcoin should pull back a bit further. I think ETH will too, but we want to pay attention to those two coins and how they pair well or poorly together in the near future in order to trade them. Between now and then, too high a risk in either direction. I don't recommend trading Ethereum right now. Take a look here at Solana. We can see the same thing as well. Obviously, altcoins are going to have a descending trend line that they haven't broken yet. But when we look at the point of control, 185 is that significant number. So keep that in mind. We are also in a scary place right now. Now, granted, if you look at every single time we've come down to this range here of 172 to 176, we can see that there's overextensions occurring. What, we got an 8 on TDS, 7 on TDS, 7, 8, and now an 8 again. So hypothetically, if history repeat itself, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is the 5th attempt to break, we're more likely to go down because of that. However, obviously history doesn't always repeat itself, but it oftentimes does. We've seen 4 out of 4 successful bounces off this lower range of 170 to 180. Okay, so that overall scenario there leads me to believe that with us being overextended leading into this, there's a decent chance Solana will run back up to at the very least 185, that local point of control. So that makes sense to me to see that. Once again, it's a risk if you take that trade. Make sure you keep leverage low and your margins tight, right? You're not going to take it long from 175 to 300. All that said, 185 is once more reaffirmed as an open interest area, once more also gravitating itself or as a magnet effectively towards that level. And what I mean by that is open interest does work as a magnet, but it also works as a support and resistance. So 185 is seeming to be more likely that we're going to see that next. But it's under the impression Bitcoin doesn't go any lower, okay? And we already kind of talked about Bitcoin having mostly bearish divergences and more likelihood of further downside to hit that 106K-ish range for liquidation. Short liquidation delta is super high. Once more, that's overextended, leading me to believe we are going to see somewhat of a reversal. There's literally no liquidation in the last 7. Well, obviously you can zoom out a little bit and see just a tiny chunk of liquidation here, but there's not a lot really here locally, okay? So really, it's just one of those situations where Solana, yes, it's performing very similar to Bitcoin right now, but I think it's due to hit its bottom fairly soon, just based on this range being fairly well guarded. Okay, so those are my thoughts there. Let's take a look at the daily time frame really quick and just quickly double check 2 more things here. Let's clear this off here. Apologize. Yeah, so the daily time frame, I just want to clarify, what is it? 204 is still at macro resistance for us. And I think we have a secondary support at 160. That was a previous low and also some confluence there in the 150s for volume. So heaven forbid we lose the 170, 180 range. I think 150 to 160 seems like a probable next consideration. I don't think we're going to stop halfway there. I think we're going to probably continue to precipitate lower. So either way, those are kind of just some key levels for Solana. And obviously, hopefully, find that that's going to be helpful for you to kind of try to trade this coin more accurately. It's a mess right now, though, folks, because there's just too many fundamentals going on right now in the world. Every little thing that happens right now, and the price action pulls back. It's crazy. So all that said, SUI, let's take a look here at the back end for SUI. Just quickly clarify the side-by-side. SUI is looking worse than Bitcoin in the last, the last 12 hours. You can see lower lows and lower highs for SUI, where we got higher highs and higher lows for Bitcoin. Again, those are very tentative, but that's not a very good pairing. So to me, trading SUI right now to the upside is inherently more risky. But as per usual, SUI is one of those coins that it rips with Bitcoin, and it rips up with Bitcoin and down as well. Okay, so and with that said, it's pretty safe to presume that SUI will probably rally if Bitcoin has just a little bit of a continuation higher. So all we got to do is see like 108 or 109K for Bitcoin. I think SUI will absolutely start to run. If it does, what the areas to pay attention to would be 238 just say 240 is the easiest number. That's that local high, and then 230 respectively. Roughly every 10 cents for this coin, you should have a take profit target. That's kind of the consideration. Liquidation short delta is high at 300 million. That's fairly overextended for this coin. All the more reason why we may see a bounce. But once more, this coin has a lot more liquidation on the downside than other coins, as low as $2.15 to $2 even. So if we see $2, I'd be more than happy to take a long just based on that being a psychological support level. Between now and then, though, it just feels super risky to take a long on this coin. I definitely wouldn't recommend it. But I'm going to set my sights here on $2. In fact, I'm just going to add an alert in that range to give us some, kind of reevaluate and see if it may be worth taking along at that point. That would be considered a high risk long, of course, because you don't try to catch a falling knife. But statistically, that level has held very well. It's a macro support and obviously a psychological support level too. So overall, that's kind of where we're at there for SUI. There's not much else to really note. I mean, we've lost our local low. We're establishing lower lows and lower highs. These are not great. We are hitting an 8 on TD sequential on the 4 hour, which means we've been moving 32 hours in the same direction. And if we see what's more, MACD and stochastic, they're both swinging down. We lost 30 on the RSI, money flow index at 20. These are typical pivot points though, folks. If you look at its history, generally speaking, when we come into these ranges, you will generally see bounces. Okay, they're usually dead cat bounces, so I wouldn't expect a whole heck of a lot if you were to buy the dip here. But the common sense here is to avoid trading this coin. But if you're going to insist on taking along the relative near future, we see one more leg down from Bitcoin. I think SUI will find its bottom. But I really think the bottom for SUI, the local bottom, is that 2 to 205 range. That's going to be an area of interest for me if and when we see that level. Okay. Between now and then, don't take any longs. It just doesn't make any sense. And honestly, once more, the narrative here is the same. Try not to take any shorts either, because when you hit a short or you open a short at these massive overextensions, the likelihood of getting stopped out is quite high. Market makers are really good about reversing the price action when that happens. Okay. So take a look here. It looks like this head and shoulders pattern is playing out for XRP, but once more, it's not because the pattern is there, okay? You got to recognize this mainly because Bitcoin's laying down and XRP is following suit. XRP, coincidentally, is one of the stronger coins right now. It has one of the lower percentage pullbacks consistent with Bitcoin. And if you look at the comparison here, while it's not perfect, it does try, and it's running fairly consistent with Bitcoin on the way back up, right? So generally speaking, when you see this price action, that's positive, or that's a good alignment with Bitcoin, effectively implying that if Bitcoin were to recover, XRP will too. Okay, unlike SUI and a handful of other coins out there right now, they're establishing lower lows and lower highs on the smaller time frames. So, anyways, this doesn't mean you just take a long right now. It just implies that you're probably safer than sorry, considering along with this coin once Bitcoin bottoms out. That's the concept there. 255 is the point of control. We can see 1 billion in short liquidation delta. That's super high for this coin. A little bit of liquidation down as low as 237. Let's zoom in just a little bit just to be safer than sorry. Look at the last 3 days. So weekend liquidation, there's not a lot. It's basically 236. So I wouldn't be surprised if XRP were to bottom out in this local range of 240. I'd be looking for a closure above 240 today to see if that were to happen, mainly because our local bottom here is roughly that level. Okay, we can see somewhat of a double bottom potential here. So could work out to be something along those lines. So let's take a look at the macro here for us and just kind of double check some other stuff here. Daily time frame, clarify once more, just so you understand if you're new to the channel, which we have a lot of new members, the macro resistance for this coin is 270 to 275. So please understand, we come back up here, we're going to see some resistance and initial rejection. We're a long ways from that, but between now and then, as far as fib levels are concerned, those are macro fibs here. I think I have these aligned here for the most recent price action we do. We got our 0.618 fib level at 238 as well. So once more, just to kind of reiterate and reaffirm to those Elliott Wave idiots out there, the fact of the matter is here that this isn't going to, you're not going to be able to find good trades right now if you use only that one thing. Same thing with anybody who only uses Fibonacci retracement. I bring that up to your attention because this 0.618 fib level has consistency at 238, roughly the same areas we're seeing open interest and also liquidation. Okay, so it implies that those are support levels for us, and this is somewhat of a reliable source here, or a reliable place, because not only is it a fib level, sure, it's retracement level, we're also seeing a local bottom here too, right? And we're also seeing an overextension leading into that. So to me, if history were to repeat itself, which again, it doesn't always have to, but in this case, it looks like it's more likely to, we can see Nice overextension with a bounce off that level. Nice overextension with a potential bounce here off this level too. So I'm speculating 236 to 240 is the local bottom for XRP. We're starting to see volume increase as the price comes down. And overall, I think we're looking pretty solid here to see a short-term tentative bounce off this level. Same thing can be said about almost every single altcoin we've covered today, though. You got to keep that in mind. The caveat here is that we don't know how low Bitcoin is going to go. If Bitcoin runs like really fast, then none of this matters. But if Bitcoin were to just start to slow down and just kind of consolidate in its current range, these coins will start to bottom out, majority of them having double bottom patterns in the local range.